Welcome. Thanks for joining us again. This is Master's Choice Podcast, Episode 4. Thanks for being with us today. Hope that you have enjoyed some of the other podcasts that we've done. So, kicking right off today, we have Scott Harris, our National Sales Manager, with us today. Hey, welcome, Scott. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Doing good. Hey, I'm glad that you were in the office today. I know that you've been gone quite a bit here lately, and so just kind of catch us up on where all you've been and what's been going on out and about.
Yeah, it is. It's actually nice to be back here. I don't necessarily miss any of you, but it's still nice to be back. No, it's not true. I do miss you guys, but so I actually totaled it up last night, and it looks like it's been about actually 35 days from January 3rd through March 17th was 35 days of travel for me. So if you do the math based on work days, it's a lot.
It's a lot. That's a lot of days gone, a lot of days away from the house.
But it's been some really good stuff that we've got to do. We've been out. I've got to go as far west as California, as far east as New York, Pennsylvania.
It's not as far east as you've been.
I have been overseas.
Yes.
Been over in Germany.
Yes.
I had a terrible travel companion for that, but you deal with it.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. I was in the same boat with you.
You had a terrible travel companion.
Travel companion
Right.
also,
Yeah.
as we were in Germany. So interesting as you've traveled around, as you've been across the country, so to speak, and then even in other parts of the world. What are some trends that you are noticing in agriculture that maybe somebody who just lives in the Midwest isn't necessarily seeing as something going on in agriculture broadly?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things and the hot topic item right now is non-GMO.
Okay. Okay.
What's going to happen? And the biggest thing for me, Mark, and maybe you've seen this too recently, is that it seemed like even when I first started, and I've been at Master's Choice, what has it been, 5.5 years now?
Almost 5.5 years for both of us. We started about 3 weeks apart.
Yep. So when I first started, non-GMO was almost emotional more than it was anything. It was emotional. It was people that wanted non-GMO because they just didn't, that's what their heart was, and they believed in it, right? Where now there's a trend happening where it is emotional for some people, but there's a financial aspect too. And there's more to it now than what there used to be.
Right. So are you seeing people transition more to non-GMO crops? Is it people wanting more non-GMO foodstuffs? I mean, where are you seeing the push or the pull really come from?
Yes. It's everything. You're hearing it from non-ag people. You're hearing it from ag people. There are farms that literally, because of conventional farming practices, feel like they're in a better situation by transitioning to non-GMO, not just financially, but for their farm future. And then there's plenty of people we deal with that are doing both.
Sure. And so when you say that somebody is moving towards non-GMO, what part of their farm are they really dealing with? I mean, when we talk about GMOs, what are we really talking about?
Right. So I think that the biggest thing is there's a concept, at least, of sustainability. They feel like they can be more sustainable with a non-GMO system. A lot of people do.
Okay. And so with non-GMO, we're really talking about the integrated traits into corn, a herbicide tolerance,
Yep.
an insect trait where it's an insect resistance. So in the industry, we've bred these things, or we've actually inserted these genes into different plants, beans and corn and other things, so that we can spray them with the herbicides and it doesn't kill the plant, or the
Right.
corn or the beans. And so we see people that are transitioning away from that, where they're saying, I want to buy seed that doesn't have these inserted traits in them. Correct?
Right.
Is that
Correct.
Okay?
Yep.
And really for us, we see that because guys are doing that because they want to feed those crops
Right.
to the animals, right?
Right.
And so I think one of the misconceptions that I see, Scott, is that all meat, all eggs, all milk by nature is GMO free.
Right.
Okay, if I eat no matter what I feed that animal, I can't detect any GMOs in there.
Right.
So really what we're talking about is that guys are transitioning to that kind of feed. What are the obstacles of transitioning a farm to a non-GMO type seed?
Right. So I think one of the biggest things that the misconception out there is that it's really difficult to make that transition. Now, I am not a farmer. I want to make that very clear. You know, I don't have thousands of acres that I'm sitting there trying to do this with. But from other farmers that I've met with, the transition in itself it's not as difficult as some people try to make it, but yet it is different. There's different chemicals you're going to use. I mean, your whole philosophy, if you're doing cover crops, there's a big change in how you're going to burn those down. You know, there's a lot of different factors that go into it, but it's not, for a lot of guys, it's going back to the way they farmed, you know, before. I mean, you know, GMOs have only been around since what, 97, 98, somewhere in that range, right?
Mid to early 90s.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's that concept of, how do I make this transition, but yet not take a step back?
Right.
So that's the biggest fear for farms. It's, you know, I think farms tend to get demonized a little bit. They think, you know, they just want the easy way out. Well, that's not it at all. This is the way the industry has trended. It made sense to do this, right? So as they begin to try to make this transition into GMOs, and then this is how they set their farm up. Well, it's not easy to just start tomorrow and change that system completely.
Right. And so it's more about management practices,
it is.
correct?
It's management more than anything, Mark. It's, you know, and there's a genetic issue there. You know, more companies tend to focus on GMOs, so that's where the genetics are going and where the industry is going. So to be a part of that and get what you feel is the best, that's where you're going to take your farm.
Yeah, and I think if I remember the statistics correctly, something like 92% of the corn planted in the United States has some kind of genetic modification to it. Well, and maybe we even ought to be careful of how we use that term, genetic modification, because we've been genetically modifying plants, domestic plants, for thousands of years. Anytime that I select for a certain trait, I'm genetically modifying that, or a hybrid is genetically modifying. So really, it's that transgenic trait that I have taken from another organism and put into the corn plant or the bean plant or something like that. That's really what we're talking about when we use this kind of generic term, GMO, a genetically modified organism. Although if we really looked at the broad definition of that, any current production plant that we have is somewhat genetically modified because of the way that we've bred and selected for those things.
Yeah, just the hybrid system itself is, it's a modification, basically, you know.
Yep.
So, I completely agree. It's you know, the biggest thing that is tough in this industry to me is that there's not great communication from both sides, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm speaking from myself here. That I talk to people that are very pro GMO. I talk to people that are very pro non-GMO, and there is a disconnect there where neither side is really listening to the other side, and you know, and it's good, and it's not going to happen until we talk about it and have things like this and talk about these things and. You know, what's your challenges? Well, you know, why can't you do this?
And I think probably sitting down and really thinking through it with, and I don't mean, when I say an open mind, I don't mean like open mind like, okay, I'm going to let you convince me, but open mind of, let me understand what this means to you. Let me understand how this works. And I think there's too much of this back and forth. I want to convince you that my way is the right way. But it is interesting that from the consumers, we are seeing this pull towards more of non-GMO type products, whether that's emotional, whether that's thought out, whether that's just wanting to know what's in my food. Right. We are seeing the consumers demand that more,
absolutely,
so to speak. How do you think that the non-GMO movement is going to affect? And now I'm going to ask you to get out your crystal ball. Okay, and I want you.
Dang it! I left that at home.
Well, I'm sure you've
maybe
done.
Somebody can grab it.
Somebody grab it for you. So. How do you think that the non-GMO movement is going to affect the organic movement? How do you see that we could be right or wrong, pure speculation, but just in your opinion.
I think that there's a couple different factors there. One is that they're two different things, right?
Very much
Non-GMO and organic are two different things, and they get lumped together all the time, and they are not the same thing. And so, like it or not, and I don't care where you stand on it, it's happening. This non-GMO movement is happening. And so we need to make sure that we're doing everything. And I say we as in the industry, the ag industry, we might have to peel back the curtain a little more and let people see what's going on, right? And give them an understanding, right? Because isn't that the biggest thing is education?
Yeah.
I think what's going to determine how far this is going to go, honestly, Mark, is who does the burden fall on to educate people? You get what I'm saying by that? In other words, does it fall on the farmer? Does it fall on, on science? Does it fall on the consumer to educate themselves? Who does the burden fall on?
So I think it's going to fall on all of us. The consumer right now, he doesn't trust the company. He doesn't trust the man, the big guy, right? Is afraid that they're lying to him, afraid that they're just in it for a buck. I think that part of this is going to fall on the farmer, but that means the farmer is going to have to be educated. And I think that there is a sense out in especially in areas that are not rural, especially in very urban areas or in the city, that they don't really understand who the farmer is today.
Right.
We grew up singing Old MacDonald, and somehow we get this picture in our head of this guy who's in an open cab tractor,
Yep.
Raking hay in his overalls and his straw hat, and that's kind of the picture that we had. But if we really got out and met some of these guys and really tried to understand their challenges, and they could communicate that, and unfortunately we have really kind of separated the guy who is the consumer from the guy who's growing the food and doing all of those things. And so I think it's going to have to be kind of a conglomeration of everybody getting together and talking through that with an open mind of, okay, I may not be 100% right. Show me where I'm not.
Right.
And let me listen to you. Let me hear your story and those kinds of things. No, I see that for sure. So just before we leave this topic real quick, what are some basic differences that you kind of set this up? What are some basic differences between non-GMO and organic? What are some of the basic differences between those two things?
Right. So the biggest thing that I think people need to understand is that from a non-GMO standpoint, you still use chemicals, right? So you're still spraying your crops. You're still using a lot of herbicides that you're very familiar with, especially, in the early stages of burn down when you're cleaning up the field to get ready to plant. You're using the same stuff that people in a traditional, conventional system is using.
Yeah.
Right?
You can still spray glyphosate on things.
Absolutely.
You just, as a burn down, you can't spray it on the plant themselves.
Right.
But you can still spray that to
Right.
clean up fields and ditch rows and
Absolutely.
and everything.
So, from an organic standpoint, you can't. Right, so there's much more manual, intensive labor that goes into the organic side. You have cultivating, depending on your size, obviously, there's a whole lot more management that goes into it. The way it's grown, also, from a hybrid standpoint, from a production standpoint, on the organic side, it has to be a certified organic field that, again, is not using chemicals, things like that. Where from a non-GMO side, you can use a different practice and be grown in a different way. There's a lot of similarities, but they're not the same thing, and I think they really get lumped together a lot.
I would agree with you on that. I think that there is a lot of education to be done there, and I think there's a lot of understanding that needs to be done. And unfortunately, I think sometimes we just don't want it. We've made a decision and we said this is what we're going to do, and I think that I think that there's room at the table. Yeah. For all of those guys. I think there's room at the table for the organic guy and there's room at the table for the non-GMO guy, and there's room at the table for the guy who's going to use genetically modified crops. I think there's room for all of us at the table for all of those things. And so one of the other topics, Scott, that I wanted to make sure that we hit today is that we were looking at was that as you're out and about, okay, you see different farms, you see different places, different soil types, different management practices. how important is hybrid placement, and kind of what is your thought process as you go through hybrid placement on a certain farm?
So one of the things that I love most about my job is like we talked about in the beginning, Mark, is I get to go to a lot of different parts of the country.
Yep.
I get to go to California, I get to go to South Dakota, Florida, East Coast. I mean, one of the challenges that I have to go to a lot of different parts of the country, and everything's so different. But there are certain principles that don't change no matter what part of the country you're in. And that's what I always tell guys, anytime we go into a new territory, I hear the same things. And it's like, well, you don't know what it's like here. It's different here. I'm like, yeah, it's different, but it's the same. And so it's just funny how that basically when I'm looking at hybrid placement and I'm looking at, what we want to do, there's some obviously main things that I think you've got to be looking at. First of all, you're going to start off, of course, with GDUs. What kind of growing units do you need? So, translate that to RM, relative maturity, whatever you want to, but really it comes down to GDUs. How many GDUs do you get in your area? What do you want to grow?
GDU being
growing, is it degree units?
Yeah. So how much heat?
Well, how much heat?
How much
heat
heat
are you getting?
Yeah.
Right?
How much heat are you getting to be able to grow that crop?
Right. Absolutely. So so you're looking at GDUs. Soil type is a big thing.
Okay.
Here in Southern Illinois, you've got a field here that is clay loam versus the field across the road is more sandy. I mean, it's so you know as well as I do, half of a field can be different here in Southern Illinois. So getting an understanding of that is so important when it comes to hybrid placement.
So why is that important?
Because I want to make sure, I think the biggest thing is that it comes down to how's the fertilizer going to move through the soil? Do I need to put more of a workhorse type hybrid? Do I need to put something that, this soil is great, it's got great potential, its nutrient uptake is high, so I'm going to put something that maybe is a little bit more racehorse type, right? So just understanding, how moisture is going to do in the soil, and moisture is probably the biggest factor there to me, as much as anything. Is can it hold moisture? Is it a dry soil?
So what you're saying is that we have, and not just we as Master's Choice, but different corn plants, different corn hybrids grow different, react different to different soil types, and knowing the characteristics of that hybrid and putting it in the right place is essential for success. Correct?
Yep. Yeah. One of the things that I think that ag people unfortunately don't do a great job with is getting a good understanding of a soil profile of each farm. Too many times, unfortunately, we walk onto a farm, we have a hybrid in mind, and just put that thing wherever you want. Yeah. Right? Instead of saying, what do you have? Where is this going to go? Where are you going to put this? And give me an understanding of what you're going to do with this so I can make sure I'm recommending the right hybrid.
Yeah, absolutely. I as the nutritional research director, I have certain hybrids that nutritionally are my favorite, Yep. And if I go on the farm and some guy says, what hybrid should I plant? I may rattle off a number, but it may not fit his soil type, and it's going to fall down. And then he's going to be aggravated like me. He's going to be on me like a spider monkey. And but knowing those soil types, and knowing how that hybrid reacts on those different types of environments is essential. So soil type is one aspect. Are there any other aspects?
So you're going to look at soil type. Obviously, the water situation. Is it a irrigated? Mm-hmm. Is it a flood irrigation? Is it drip irrigation? What are we dealing with? Is it dry land? I would say now we're getting before when I first started, very little ground that we dealt with was irrigated.
Right.
Because we were mostly right here in the Midwest. Primarily in some of the East, there's just not a ton of it. Now that we've moved more west and south, and it's the opposite. Almost everything we deal with now is irrigated. So I need an understanding of that to be able to know, and not just irrigation. What type of irrigation is important? Because there's each plant, as well as I do, each plant responds differently to the type of irrigation. Doesn't mean it won't work, right? But I need to know.
That give it the best chances for success.
Yep.
Does management and maybe even this, if you're on an organic farm, are you going to maybe recommend a little bit different hybrid than you would on a non-GMO farm, or
Absolutely.
even a conventional, or so to speak, farm?
Absolutely. There's just such a big difference when it comes to management in the three of those are so different, and they're all three completely different, right? I know that from an organic standpoint, and I'm not speaking for every organic farm, but many of them, it's a much tougher environment. They can't use some of the same things that we talked about earlier that the conventional guys get into use. So we need to make sure we're using hybrids that are going to be able to withstand those challenges a little bit more. And so, that's one of the biggest things that we have to look at is, what's your goal? There is just too much of hybrid placement and recommendation without really even knowing what a guy's goal is.
Yeah, I would agree.
What's your end use? What are you going to use this for?
Yeah.
Are you using silage? Are you doing high moisture corn? Are you using dry grain? What's your goal here, right? And not just what's your yield goal. That's, sure, yield goal is definitely but what's your nutritional goal? What are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
How many different farms do we go on that one farm we're at, man, I need butter fat.
Yeah.
And then the next guy says, I don't care about butter fat. I need,
I just need more milk.
Yep. I want to overflow my tank.
Absolutely.
Right.
I was actually kind of thinking through this. I was in Wisconsin a few weeks ago, and we were having a series of meetings, and one of the sales guys there was really kind of talking to those guys about, hey, if you want to go for higher quality, maybe we need to look at some different hybrids for your place. If you've got a huge stockpile, maybe we can back down some populations, get a really good high feeding value type hybrid on your place. Maybe since you've got enough silage, enough inventory, let's go for quality. And that would affect the way that, because of his in use, because of his inventories, that may affect the hybrid that we put on that place.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. There's not enough conversation happening in that topic, in my opinion, Mark, is that and I'm not blaming the seed guy.
Yeah.
He's trying to get in the farm, get him some corn and move on. But there's just not enough talk about what's your goal here. What are you trying to accomplish?
What's your goal? What field is this hybrid going in?
Yep.
And I think sometimes we look at the farm as a whole unit, and we need to talk about this, maybe even this acre, right? Or this field, and what's it going, and what are you going to do with it, and what are your plans, and what are your goals, and being able to sit down and plan through some of that space.
Right. And then, one of the other things that people have to think about too with this, Mark, is traits. What do you need?
Yeah.
Not what do you want, what do you need?
What do you need?
The trait market is, think about what's been accomplished in the trait market in, this really short amount of time that they've been out.
Yeah.
We now have, multiple modes of action that we can combat so many different insects. And it's really impressive what companies have been able to bring out from a trait standpoint, when it comes down to it. But I think there's too much of people putting out and not even knowing what they're putting out.
Right. Right.
How many times, Mark, have you walked on a farm and, what kind of traits do you use? Corn borer. What else? I don't know. It's just
whatever my seed guy sold.
Yeah,
me.
whatever the guy said.
Yep.
Yeah, they have no idea what they're planning.
Absolutely. Hey, Scott, we're gonna bring in kind of on the phone here in just a second, Todd Martin from IPSA, and so we're gonna make that call. We're gonna bring him in, and we'll introduce him here in a second. Okay.
Good.
All right. Hey, Todd, we've got you on the phone now. This is Todd Martin, the Executive Director of IPSA. Todd, thanks for joining us today.
Well, Mark, you're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Good deal. Hey, Todd, tell us a little bit, kind of briefly, define or explain what IPSA is for us.
Sure. The Independent Professional Seed Association, also known as IPSA, was founded in 1989. Currently, we have 108 independently owned seed companies throughout the country, predominantly in the Midwest. I like to say I go up and down the central time zone a lot, and another 140 associated businesses as associate members. We're currently represented in 25 states, but we do consider ourselves national. And with that 108 seed companies comes approximately 20% of the U.S. corn seed sales and 22% of the U.S. soybean sales. So, solidly a fifth of the market is sold to farmers by independent seed companies.
Good. Hey, real quick, just kind of explain what an independent seed company is for us, Todd.
That's a really good question. Our definition is, I think, pretty broad, but it is a independently, one person owned, family owned, sole proprietorship, or does come into partnerships, or we even define it as a closely held cooperative in some cases. That doesn't mean like the local co-op, people may go down and buy their crop protection or seed from, but a, closely held seed producing and selling cooperative. And, independents are those that are involved in the production and or sale of seed.
Good deal.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Todd. This is Scott. So, kind of start us off here. Let's talk about what we've been hearing, and I would like to know what your thoughts are on this. Is one of the biggest things that people are concerned about is the mergers that are happening. You have Dow and DuPont, and all these Kim China and Syngenta. You have all these mergers that are going on. Bayer, Monsanto. So these are all hot topics. People are concerned. Is that what you're hearing? Or are people happy? Are people worried? Are they thrilled about it? What are you hearing? I would like you to talk about it from two things, if you could. From the company standpoint, what are companies thinking? And what are people thinking? What are you hearing from farmers?
Well, Scott, it's a really good question. My view currently is that the ag consolidation is a big challenge. This is going to be one of the most enduring things that happens for big agriculture from this point going forward, and we'll look back at this, I believe, even a decade from now, and think that this was one of those key turning points. I guess to understand everything that's going on in the ag, I always want to look back a little bit and think about, a brief history of time, if you will, just to get good grounding, because as consolidation has come forward, this is not the first time we've seen it. It's the most dramatic time that we've seen it, in my opinion. But if we go all the way back to 1929, we saw a couple of things that started happening all the way back then, and that was really the rise of hybrid corn. And in 29, only 0.5% of the U.S. corn market was hybrid corn. The rest of it was varietal corn. Now, you move forward 11 years later, and the number of the amount of hybrid corn in the market was 100%. It had taken the market by storm. Then you saw some things like synthetic fertilizers come in World War II, and then the rise of the pesticide products, notably atrazine, in the late 40s and 50s. And the reason these three things are important is they gave rise to what we call big business agriculture. They were important components where we saw the rise of large companies like back in the day, J.R. Geigy, Ciba, Sandoz, Monsanto came in, and that's where those companies really got their foothold in agriculture. And that was in the 40s and 50s. And so you saw a change as companies were bought up and strategies changed. Big oil came in. Standard Oil became a part of it in the 60s. Then we had pharmaceutical firms that started rising up. You saw the big pushes like with Bayer and other pharmaceutical companies. And then you started seeing combinations when Ciba and Geigy went together. That was a big issue. And that happened all the way back in 1970. Then the rise of the life sciences companies came in the late 80s and 90s. And you saw another major merger in between Ciba Geigy at that time and Sandoz to form Novartis as a life sciences company, and several companies started following behind that. But then, of course, biotechnology came in 1995. And that, with the advent of Roundup Ready soybeans and BT corn, and then later Roundup Ready cotton and BT cotton, that was where you started to see big numbers of consolidations go together with the companies. For people that were around then and remember, and I remember it very well, we were looking at what we considered were 11 very large, very successful multinational companies in agriculture. Well, in a few short years, it was down to about 6. And I mean, the names that were out there that you thought you would never lose were names like American Cyanamid, that today is not there. Ciba Geigy today is not there. So, there has been consolidation all the way along the lines. What has given, I think more momentum here is we saw a consolidation of 11 companies down to 6 large companies, and then some smaller companies that were out there in the crop protection side. But now in the seed industry, where these companies have been gathering up for the last several years since '96, since biotechnology came in. We're now looking at a piece where we're going to have 6 go to 3 potentially. And yes, that in my mind has not only independent seed companies concerned, and rightly so, it also has growers concerned. And you can see this even in Washington, where, you know, the Senate Judiciary Committee back a couple of months ago under the leadership of Senator Grassley had a hearing on ag consolidation. You've had 3 major issues that have emerged between Dow-DuPont last year, then Kim China and Syngenta started coming together, and then the bigger one, which was Monsanto and Bayer, which that's the one that people seem to be focusing on right now, even though on the big scale of total companies, Dow-DuPont, you know, with all their different pieces, is a bigger acquisition, bigger merger than the Monsanto-Bayer piece is. But in ag, Monsanto-Bayer is the giant in the room right now.
Hey, Todd.
So, yes, people are concerned.
Todd, explain to us just real quick, and maybe this is pure speculation, maybe it's something that you know and that you've heard. What is the driving force behind the consolidations?
It's a good question, and I think from my perspective, it's going to be speculation. But I think that we've seen a little bit of a slowdown in innovation and a very large rise in the expense of innovation. Now, those, you know, big words that everybody likes to throw around in the corporation. Put it simply said, it's harder to find a product to bring to market, and it costs a lot more money to bring a product to market. You know, we've sat here and we've watched biotechnology, and I can speak directly about Syngenta with their AgriSure Viptera product and their AgriSure Duracade product that has taken long times to get registered on the market, primarily because of foreign registrations, not because of slowdowns in the United States. But that impact has created, you know, a longer path to market. More money is spent. There's less time to get products in the pipeline to actually be sold and see a return on it. So expenses are going up, revenues are going down. And it's not only on biotechnology products that you're seeing that on. You're seeing that in crop protection products as well, where, you know, you're seeing a lot less new AIs, new formative AIs that are coming out. And in fact, we seem to be, you know, going back to the future when you start considering that, you know, Dow's Enlist technology is going back to a 2,4-D, which is old technology, to be able to come to market with new herbicide strength to combat resistance. Monsanto's Xtend technology, the dicamba molecule, has been around for a very long time, and of course it's being brought back now again to try and manage some of the resistance. And part of that is we're not seeing new modes of action and new AIs introduced into the marketplace. They're harder to find, and they're more expensive to develop, and there's a longer path to market than there's ever been before because of regulatory hurdles. So it's just a factor of costs are going up and products are aging, and we need more things out there, and companies are seeing that their R&D costs are very expensive, and there is cost savings going in growing and merging.
Right. Hey, Todd, so you've done a really good job of explaining, you know, from an overall what this looks like from the company standpoint. Let's talk about the farmer. You know, what positives, negatives, we want you to just be, you know, we don't necessarily want just a one-sided view of it, but what is this going to mean for a farmer? Is it going to change anything for the farm?
Well, it's a really good question. And, you know, you can talk a little bit out of both sides of your mouth here and sound like you don't know which way you really think is going to go, because there are some opportunities here that represent value to the farmers and value to independent seed companies. One of the things that I have to say that I think is exciting is that as Dow and DuPont go together, and I'm going to talk a little bit about independent seed company potential benefits, and then that'll also lend its way to farmer benefits as well. When you see Dow and DuPont go together, what you see is a company like Dow that's had a strong history of out-licensing and a strong character of out-licensing their traits in germplasm. And you see Pioneer, who's not really had a vehicle, Pioneer from DuPont, to out-license their germplasm. And Pioneer, of course, has got some of the best germplasm sitting out there in their stores in the world. So this has been sold by the Pioneer brand, but the innovations available to be able to utilize in the marketplace by other companies have not been available because of contract restrictions. We could see an opportunity come with a combination of Dow and DuPont where Pioneer were to inject germplasm into Dow's already strong out-licensing vehicle, and then thereby we see new products coming into the marketplace that independent seed companies haven't seen before, and that means that they come back down into the farm where independent seed companies are selling their farmer customers, and so you see a rise of a whole new host of products coming in.
Yeah.
You can even take that a step further to say that in some quarters, if we really had it the way that would be nice, then, there would be Pioneer males and females that would come out and be able to be combined with males and females from other companies that have not been done previously, and maybe we would see some really new innovative products that would drive yield.
Right.
So there are some really exciting potentials on one side of it if you consider it.
Right.
Now on the other side is that it could go a different direction. The market could become more restrictive, which means that you would see independents have to line up with, for instance, a Dow DuPont provider or a Monsanto Bayer provider or a Syngenta Chem China provider if all those mergers are consummated, which really would not be much more innovative than it is right now. And, you could potentially see independents having to become more of smaller brands of larger companies, if you will, which I don't think is probably the best way forward, and certainly hope that doesn't happen. So there are positives and negatives both ways depending on how you look at it
Right.
and how it ultimately comes down.
Right. I think that's a great way to say it, Todd. And I think we're running out of time, looks like. So we're going to wrap this up. I guess in ending, one of the things that I've heard, and you can confirm or deny this, is, we get questions, well, independents are going to go away. They're all going to be gone. And, what's going to happen to all the independents? Biggest advice I have, if you're pro independent companies, keep buying from them. I mean, that's how they're going to stay in business, is if people continue to use them and use that. Would you, quickly, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think you've nailed it. I think independents have been strong for the last several years and will continue to be strong as long as farmers buy from them. And we see that farmers like the experience they get with independent seed companies.
Right.
My saying, I'll close on this, my saying is independent seed companies learned how to deal with people going to Sunday school, not business school. And
Absolutely.
I think that says a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Todd, thanks a lot for taking some time out of your morning. And we are very proud and happy to be members of IPSA. You guys do a lot for independent companies, and you take us to really cool places like San Diego for the convention. And so I definitely appreciative of that. But you guys do a lot for the industry, and I think it's important piece of the ag industry that I think is going to become bigger. I think it's going to become a bigger part of what we do. So, Todd, thank you so much for taking time out of your morning and visiting with us, and we look forward to continuing that relationship. And if somebody does have questions about independent companies, I assume does IPSA have a website for the public, or what's?
We absolutely do. They can reach us at ipseed.org. And got all our contact information, emails, telephone numbers, and they can give us a call, and we can even help direct growers to their nearest independent seed company or a couple of them to give them some choices.
Well, just remember, we're nationwide, Todd, so we're near everybody.
That's great.
All right. Well, thanks, Todd. We really
appreciate it. Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Todd.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So we do want to thank Todd for joining us today, and how informative that was, and just a look at that independent seed, or that seed producer, that independent guy who's out there. Who we are. We are an independent seed company, and so it's good to know that there's an organization of those guys that are there to help promote and protect them. So, Scott, one thing that I really kind of want to end with today, and then I want you to kind of think through real quick, is it's getting close to planting time. Okay, if it was dried up here in southern Illinois right now, there would be guys planting. Yep. I have friends who are chomping at the bit, so to speak. So as it's getting close to planting time, what is what is one aspect of planting that you can think of that can really affect the yield and the quality of the crop at the end of the year? What's one aspect?
Right. I think the one aspect that is just what's crazy is it's one of the biggest aspects, but it's one of the most ignored aspects is seed spacing. I mean, seed spacing is so important. Depth is important. Fertilizer is important. These are all things that you have to have.
Yeah.
But seed spacing gets ignored.
Right.
It's population. That's what people talk about. People talk about population, but what does it really come down to?
Yeah, it really kind of comes down to seed spacing.
Absolutely.
How many plants in the field is going to determine how far apart they are.
Absolutely.
And how far apart they are can really affect yield and quality. If I get plants that are crammed together, okay, if I get those plants that are crammed together, I've negatively affected yield and quality. So what is your kind of recommendation? What are we really looking for when we're looking at seed spacing and population?
Right. So I don't care as like we've kind of led up to this, but I don't care as much about how many plants you want to put out as much as I do is how far apart are they. Mm-hmm. We've got so many different row types. You got 15, 30, 20, 24. I think some guys plant. I mean, there's so many different row types. Fine, that's great. But you need to make sure you're at, that 6.5, 7 inch spacing when all said and done, to allow that plant to do what it wants to do.
So if I'm planting on 30-inch rows, okay, where does that typically leave my population need to kind of be?
Right. So I mean, we've got a seed spacing chart that we use. On a 30-inch row, you're going to be around 30,000 population for 7 inches.
Okay.
So, and you can Google it. You can literally just Google seed spacing chart, and it'll give you a bunch of different ones that you can look at, and just look at it. Take a few minutes and look at it.
So as he is planting, okay, and he said, okay, I want 7-inch seed spacing, so I'm gonna, or I want 6-inch seed spacing. He's gonna plant, a little heavier. Maybe he's gonna plant at 34,000 or whatever. And says, I want good seed spacing. What's the one thing that besides, okay, I've got to change the sprockets on the planter, or new planters now, I can just push a button. What's the one thing that he's really got to be careful about when he's putting that seed in the ground?
Yeah, well, you mean from a spacing standpoint?
Yeah. What is going to help ensure that he gets good seed spacing there?
Okay, so not everybody has precision planting, right? We have a lot of guys still out there that don't. Precision planting obviously is pretty ideal because it will help with that a lot. But making sure you're getting the right seed for what you're trying to accomplish, make sure your planter is set up correctly, make sure that your depth is right, make sure that you're planting the right hybrid for the situation that you're trying to accomplish. Some hybrids can handle a little heavier population and handle a closer spacing, right? Where some need that space to accomplish what they want. But speed, how fast you're going,
speed
is a big deal, man. We want, it's the mindset, and you and I both have farmers that are friends, and they'll probably hear this and they'll probably get mad at me, but you guys got to slow down a little bit,
Absolutely, slow down.
Yeah, from a farmer standpoint, I get it. I know the weather's good today. I don't know what the weather's going to be tomorrow. The local news guy tells me it's going to be this or that, but I know it's good today. So my gosh, I'm going to get it in the ground. And I get that. I get it. But are you causing yourself harm by forcing it in the ground too fast?
Absolutely. Scott, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate you being here, being part of this. Brought some really good information. And so I guess that I'll see you around the office for a few days.
Yeah.
And then off again.
Yep. I'm going to be here for a while. Here for a few weeks. So
good.
You'll see this beautiful mug a lot.
Maybe I can be gone now.
Maybe you could, that'd be ideal.
That would be ideal.
If you could find some place to go, that'd be great.
All right. Hey, thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Hey, guys, we appreciate you joining us today for MC Podcast Episode 4. Hope that you enjoyed it. And, hey, we are social, so you can look us up on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and also on the World Wide Web at seedcorn.com. We appreciate you guys joining us today.